Dr. Michael Youssef.
Thank you for having me.
Been on many times, Bible teacher on the program Leading the Way, heard here on American Family Radio and other fine stations, and he also has an international outreach with his ministry, particularly to the Arabic-speaking world. Dr. Youssef, thanks for joining us. Tim here with Tony.
Thank you both, Tim and Tony. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you're our go-to guy on Egypt. You grew up there, have a lot of family there, and I know you're an American Christian pastor now, but still you pay close attention to what's going on back in Egypt. But what's the latest there as you see it?
Well, supposedly the Morsi, the president of Egypt, is going to give a speech tonight to the nation, and it's amazing. I wonder who is learning from whom, but we have a president very similar to this. He kind of makes a statement, and then he kind of tries to explain it away, and never backs away from it, even if it is a controversial one. And he met with the Supreme Court, members of the Supreme Court of Egypt, tried to kind of persuade them to understand that his decision to appoint himself as a supreme leader, a dictator really, is just temporarily, and to protect the revolution and to protect democracy. It's like people are idiots or something. I mean, the Egyptian educated folks, I mean, they are highly educated, and that's why those folks took to the streets. They saw through this. And it's just not going to work. And it's either going to have a bloodbath or he's going to have to retract, because the other forces, the secular forces, are very, very strong, and they don't want to happen to them what happened to Iran, where they started the revolution and then was hijacked by the mullahs. And they feel that the revolution that they started has been taken away from them by the Islamists and the jihadis. And that's a very tragic thing.
The rationale sounds like this. You know, look, he's telling the Egyptians who were a part of or supported this Arab Spring, we want to protect your rights, so we're going to take them away and lock them up in a lockbox so they're protected.
Yeah, so you can never see it again. I mean, it's really foolishness and dishonor. I mean, that stuff. I mean, I wrote a blog in my michaelyoussef.com this week, and I showed exactly how he manipulated the Hamas shooting of those missiles on Israel, forcing Israel, of course, to defend itself. They have no other option. And then he orchestrated the ceasefire, so as soon as Clinton landed, she was handed the ceasefire. Okay, I got it done for you. And so Susan Rice, the Secretary of State in waiting, goes into the microphone and praise him profusely. And then 24 hours later, he says, okay, now that I got the Americans on my side, I'm now the new dictator, not a secular dictator, but an Islamist dictator.
Talking to Dr. Michael Youssef. Michael, how can people access that blog you wrote?
michaelyoussef.com, or it's found on One News Now. Either place you'll read it. It's it really had an incredible response, and I'm so glad, because I sort of, in a sense, what I did, I connected the dots for folks to see the complicit agreement or support for Islamists and the Muslim Brotherhood by the Obama administration.
So what you got here was it like 80 million people live in Egypt? I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, a little over.
80 to 90 million people live in Egypt. It's the largest Arab country in the world.
Right.
And it's very important to the Middle East.
Yeah. And also the story that most of the media, worldwide media, really missed is that in the last 10, 20 years, the largest growing group, now there are many people embracing the Christian faith, which is great, and I'm talking about probably in not hundreds of thousands, or could be in the millions, but they are, of course, by necessity, they're underground. But there are also an extreme large number of people who actually nothing, and that is really missed on the Western media. There's a vast number, again in the millions, who just they said, well, yeah, we're born Muslims, but we really don't want to embrace any religion.
Now, and also to remind folks, you got the situation there. What happened during the so-called Arab Spring was you had a revolution inside Egypt. This is a year and a half or so ago, to overthrow the Mubarak administration. Mubarak ruled there as a dictator for a long, long time there. And so people got tired of that. A lot of people got tired of that, and they rose up and they overthrew him. Well, what happened was a significant percentage, maybe 50%, I don't know, you can tell me, Michael, of the population are of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're the extreme Islamic group. So the other 50% would be, I think you call them secularists, or people who don't want to see the Muslim radicals overtake the government. Have I got that right?
No, not quite.
Okay.
You might have about 40% Muslim Brotherhood, but then you have another 20% of what they call themselves the Salafites. These are far more extreme Islamists than the Brotherhood.
Really?
Yes, and they were elected. 20% of the parliament that was dissolved was Salafites. These are really people who advocate jihad and killing the non-believers, and some of them were imprisoned for years under Sadat and Mubarak. The Salafites are really far more dangerous than the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood, bad enough, but you get some group of people even worse than them. So you end up with about 30% would be the Coptic and the secular-minded folks.
Are they the ones in the street?
They're the ones in the streets in Tahrir Square right now. And tomorrow they got another huge demonstration. Hundreds of thousands of them are coming out and saying, we don't want Sharia, we don't want dictatorship again. And some of them who have voted for Morsi, they think, well, this is different. It's a different candidate. He promised all these things. He promised democracy. He promised freedom to everybody. He promised protection of women's rights, Christian rights. But then, of course, he went into power. As I've said years ago, when this thing broke out, I said, watch my word. I was on CNN for 3 hours. I said, watch my word. It's going to be one man, one vote, one time. Because democracy is an antithesis to the heart of Islam.
Absolutely.
Islam and democracy cannot mix like water and oil.
And our foreign policy has not taken that into consideration.
They never understood it.
No.
Republicans and Democrats. I'm
Absolutely.
not picking on one.
Absolutely.
Neither
The
of them
Bush administration.
I spent hours in the days of the Reagan administration with some folks over there trying to explain to them why democracy cannot work, because it's like a rose. If you cut a rose out of its soil and you put it in a vase, it's not going to last for very long. And democracy was in the soil of Reformation, is in the soil of biblical understanding of the value of man, which alien to Islamic thinking.
Yeah, the individual really has no value in
Exactly.
the Islamic world. Let me go to that 30%, the Coptic Christians, those who are more secular in their thinking. How do they view the United States? Where do they see America factoring into this?
Well, to be quite honest, many of them are really very upset with the United States right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they're very upset with the United States is seeing that while they helped, they came against Mubarak and got him out, but now they are really complicit in their support of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Kind of
they
enabling
have
them.
actually discussed that when Muslim Brotherhood was an outlawed group under Mubarak, our esteemed president, when he went and gave the Cairo speech, he insisted on them coming in the auditorium and sit up front. Outlawed group. He was adamant. He told his host president, Mubarak, that he wants him right there in the front and center. And that gave them an incredible gumption to realize, boy, the American president is supporting us, he's behind us. And from then on, they really began to do the unthinkable.
I want to ask you one other question about, this is kind of a political question, Dr. Youssef, and that is, we don't
ask political questions on this program. All right.
Well, let me ask you, how's the family, Michael? No, I want to ask you a question. I do care about your family, but I want to ask you a question about this. The United States federal government, gives a lot of money to Egypt.
Yep, totaling $2 billion.
$2 billion. Now, I want people to don't misunderstand me. I want you to understand me because people are going to have a reaction. You believe that, Wildman? I can't believe you. In some cases, it's good to have leverage in a country like perhaps Egypt. This is why I'm asking your opinion, Dr. Youssef.
Yeah.
With people want to say, well, you're bribing them to do what you want them to do. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
and I'm not talking. I'm saying to you, that's a very pragmatic view, but that's not always a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? So
sure.
how do you view the money that we give Egypt, and what kind of leverage that gives us to Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, and to try to keep them from being more radical?
Well, you need to remember the history of that money. The history of that money, it was pledged and paid during the Carter administration, and it was precisely to get Sadat to sign the Camp David Agreement. It was a money that was given to Egypt in order to assure them of getting military hardware, and a lot of it is, but also as long as the peace treaty and there is diplomatic relations between Egypt and Israel, that was the money for. It wasn't just to gain influence, and it wasn't just to buy the people into power, although that's how it turns out to be. But that was not the original intent. The original intent was you keep the peace with Israel, you try to influence the other Arab countries to come to the table and be at peace with Israel, try to help the Palestinians to come to a negotiating table with Israel. So that was really the money for. And
well,
now they have, literally, the relationship between Israel and Egypt is abysmal, and now the many al-Qaeda types are taking over the Sinai Desert. They're moving from Afghanistan to the Sinai, and make no mistake about it, mark my words for the future. When I come on the program a few months from now, they're going to cause a lot of trouble to Israel.
Yeah. Dr. Youssef, thanks for your time.
Sure.
We appreciate it, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Pleasure to
and
talk
say
to you
hello
both.
to the family.
I sure will.
Okay.
God bless.
All right,
Bye-bye.
you too. You're listening to the radio program Today's Issues